Welcome everyone listening. This is the second podcast of a mini-series focused on educational research. Over the next few months, we'll have a conversation with accomplished ATSU researchers to learn more about what got them hooked on research, how they got started, the tools that help them stay productive, and what they are excited to explore next. This mini-series is for anyone interested in educational research with any experience level. Here with you guiding this discussion, you have the TLC team comprising of myself, Quincy, Brittany, Julie, and behind the scenes, we have Brenda. Say hello, Brittany.
Hi, Quincy.
Say hello, Julie.
Hi, Quincy. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Julie, who do we have the pleasure of speaking with today for this month's podcast episode?
We're delighted to be speaking with Dr. Ann Spolarich today. Dr. Spolarich is Assistant Dean for Research in the Arizona School of Dentistry and Oral Health, ASDOH, and co-director of the Center for Oral Health Research in the ATSU Research Institute. She holds a faculty role and serves as an educator to both predoctoral dental students and residents. Dr. Spolarich holds degrees in both dental hygiene and physiology, and her research focuses on identifying oral health needs and best practices for caring for medically complex patients, clinical trials for dental product and device testing, and educational research using gaming and simulation. Dr. Spolarich, welcome to the Talk, Listen, Collaborate podcast.
Oh, thanks, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here.
So for this mini-series, we are looking at a day in the life of a researcher at ATSU. Would you mind sharing with us what an average day looks like for you?
That's a great question. There is no such thing, I guess, as an average day. I wear a lot of hats here at the dental school and in the university. So I have to flex and bend to accommodate a lot of different responsibilities that I have. So as it pertains to research, I obviously have a big administrative role with managing and oversight of research. So I will typically have some kind of meetings related to research administration, whether it's meetings about a grant or advising a faculty member or a student, or maybe checking in on a study that we have going on in progress. And then, of course, I have teaching responsibilities. And on Wednesdays, I'm in the clinic in our special care clinic in our advanced care center at ASDOH. So I move around a lot depending on the day of the week and what is on my plate for the day. I think that's pretty typical, actually, for most people in a similar role.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is Quincy. And if I may ask, as Assistant Dean of Research in ASDOH, you have a unique vantage point on research that's going on at ASDOH and across the university. Can you share what types of research are being conducted by faculty, staff, and students in ASDOH?
Yeah, we have a lot of really interesting things that are going on. So, Julie was mentioning some of the kinds of things that I'm involved in, and they really parallel a lot with what we're doing with our research agenda here in the dental school. So, we have a big emphasis on interprofessional education and practice. And I think that's also common in many of the other schools within our university. We've certainly done some interesting collaborations on research projects through some of our mutual HRSA grants. So we've done all kinds of things in terms of interprofessional practice, looking at different models of care. I'm currently collaborating on a grant where we're looking to bring a medical professional into our clinical setting, where we're sort of flipping the paradigm that currently exists where we put a dental professional into a medical setting. We want to reverse it and see what happens. Really excited about that. We, of course, have very well-known, nationally recognized teledentistry program here at ASDOH that gave birth through a HRSA grant and is led by one of our still Research Institute members and faculty members, Scott Howell. So we have some grants related to that, looking at the impact of that model and also looking at it from an educational perspective in training students and residents to actually learn how to function in this type of workforce model. Of course, we're always really interested in studying how we can do things better with caring for our patients. So we have ongoing studies that look at different interventions, things like quality of life in our patients and those kinds of studies. And then certainly device and product testing. We do clinical trials fairly routinely with products that are already available on the commercial market, typically looking for efficacy of those products in reducing oral disease in a whole host of vulnerable populations. And then sort of our newest endeavor is with simulators in education. So we have quite the spectrum of things that are going on. And then of course our students are involved in helping us, but I'm really a firm believer that students should pick a topic that they're passionate about. One of the things I think many people in research learned that, there's uphill battles sometimes and challenges that you encounter along the way, and it has to be your passion for the topic that carries you through. So I really like students to come to me and say, hey, I'm really interested in this, and I want them to take the lead because that's what's going to keep them going. So we have students now who are really interested in technology in all manner, shapes, and form, in different types of dental conditions and management of those conditions. We have students who are very interested in dental materials and how they perform in patients. We also have students who are involved in survey research, where they talk with patients about their experiences using structured interviews or traditional survey methods. We've got sort of the whole range going on, and it changes every year. And I just love that because the diversity is what keeps it fresh and interesting.
Yeah, you started out and by kind of explaining that no 2 days are alike, and if it wasn't clear before, it's crystal clear now. And I want to ask a follow-up question to this idea of getting students involved and empower them to engage in the various ways to do research. What would you estimate? What is your perspective on the value of dental students doing research? What do you think? What is the goal? What is the outcome? What is the benefit of doing that, do you think?
Yeah. So I think there's several benefits. Number one, and probably most importantly at this stage in their career, is that it reinforces the love for lifelong learning. Because if you get excited about something, you're going to want to continue to learn more about that topic. And then, of course, the best thing about research is that it takes you down different paths and it makes you think about things that you didn't think about before. That's the beauty. One of the things I love about being involved in research. So I think that's a really important concept for students. Number two, I think for students who are intending to specialize in some way, get into especially a very highly competitive specialty residency training program, they are going to be expected as residents to conduct original research. So the beauty of having an experience in dental school is that it allows students the opportunity in a very safe space to walk through the process so that they've understand what it's like to write a grant. They understand what it's like to create an IRB application and submit that process. They know what it's like to stand up in front of a group of people and talk about your research and write it up. They learn the mechanics or the business of developing and following through a study start to finish so that they're not blindsided when they get into those residencies. Also, I think it helps to make them more competitive in terms of candidates to get into those programs. And then, of course, the ultimate outcome is we hope we instill the desire to become a researcher in their career. And, we have a program in the Still Research Institute that is a program that's designed for students and developing them as clinician researchers in the hopes that they're going to continue to aspire to become those individuals who will later take the charge of helping to grow the knowledge base in our discipline. And so I think it starts early, and that's a good thing.
Wow, that's incredible. And you've talked about all the amazing things that you're doing over at ASDOH. I'd like to switch gears just a little bit and learn more about your own research agenda. Can you tell me, you mentioned the word passion specifically. Can you tell me what big questions are you answering in your own research? What makes you passionate?
Well, there's two things that I really love. I am very passionate about caring for older adults. I always have been. In my career as a dental hygienist, I have worked in hospitals. I've worked with older adults in a variety of settings, and I'm very passionate about caring for our veterans. And I used to work at the Philadelphia VA hospital for many years. I was on a very, very large longitudinal trial there. So I think helping people to age successfully and the impact that oral health has on aging well is something that I'm very passionate about. So all things related to aging, medical disorders, quality of life, function, how to help people who often have diagnoses of cancer as they become older adults, and what are the impacts that that has in somebody's life. And I had also a sort of a companion piece to my passion, which of course is pharmacology, because I'm a professor of pharmacology. But working in all those settings and with older adults means that you encounter drugs as a part of everyday life. And how can we help to better increase the understanding of the way drugs impact the body and oral health? So one of the coolest projects I did was I did a training program with pharmacists who are based within the community, and helping them to train older adults who come into the pharmacy looking for advice about what oral care products are best suited and intended to help their problems. And pharmacists receive very little training in their formal education about how to counsel older adults related to oral health. And so I did some collaboration with Nova Southeastern University in Florida in the School of Pharmacy, and also University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, along with a major foundation. And we did these wonderful interprofessional educational research studies and training with pharmacists, with the intent ultimately of that we help older adults in the community. So those are some of the things that I personally am very passionate about. And then of course, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I left academia after the first 10 years of my career, and I worked in industry. And then I have subsequently returned to academia. But I'm also really passionate about communicating science correctly. And when you have products that are developed, there's this whole side of industry that many people don't appreciate in the scientific affairs divisions of companies. And how do you translate that hardcore science into meaningful communications for the public and for professional people? So I actually have a lot of experience in working in that arena too. So I would say science communication is another passion of mine. Very diverse, right? But that's what keeps it fresh and interesting.
Absolutely. So, with talking about communicating science meaningfully, you've given over 900 national and international lectures, which is astounding and incredible. What tips can you share about presenting your research?
Yeah, it's over 1,000 now. And in all fairness, they weren't all research presentations, but I think when you get invited to give a talk, it's because of the work that you're doing, and people are aware of the work that you do. And you know what? Here's the best tip. You have to love what you do, and you have to be enthusiastic about what you do. Because that's what engages other people in the work that you're doing. And I always tell my students, you're going to go to a meeting, and you're going to go into an exhibit hall, and there's going to be hundreds of people standing in front of their posters. Like, I'm sure many people listening will have this experience. And people are standing there for 2 hours and nobody's talking to them. And then you go, well, what is the value of this experience? And it's so disappointing because you've put all this effort into your science. And so, I'm one of those really sort of obnoxious people where if you're walking by my poster, I go, hey, let me tell you about my project, right? And you pull some people in, and then as people are walking by, they go, hey, look, there's 3 people standing there talking to her. I wonder what that's about, And I also give a tip, like if you can score the end poster in the aisle, it's a great location for that because you can grab a lot of people walking by. I also think it's a good tip to have a plant in the audience, like have some of your friends come by at the beginning of the poster session and give your poster to your friends, and then it drives traffic, and then the next thing you know, those 2 hours go by so fast because you've been talking nonstop and engaging people. But I think when you're at the podium, it's just really important to be yourself and to be real. People who know me well know that like what you see is what you get. If you ask me something, I'm going to tell you what I think that my opinion is or answer is, just to be your authentic self. And I think, again, your enthusiasm, don't be afraid to share when, like, hey, we tried this and it failed fatally, and so we had to do a rework. I think people respect that. They see that you are in it for the right reasons. Those are some of the tips I have found that actually work really well for me. We're all in
That's
it together,
awesome.
right? We're all trying to be the best that we can be. So life is hard enough. Don't make it harder than it has to be.
Absolutely. I loved what you said about the location of the posters, right? I feel like in
Great
real
tip.
estate, it's always location, location,
Yeah,
location. I guess
that's right.
it is at scientific conferences too.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't have that. They assign you to a board, so that kind of stinks. But if you have and you can grab the end, always grab the end.
I love that you're giving us tips. I'm like feverishly writing these down. So if you were talking to someone that you maybe were mentoring, what advice would you give them about what it means to be a productive researcher? In your opinion, what does that mean to you?
Love this question, because as any good scientist will tell you, before you figure out how you're going to measure something, you have to operationalize what that means, right? So how do we operationalize what does productivity mean? So of course you have all the standard metrics in academia, right? What I call the loop. You have the idea, you write the grant, you do the study, you disseminate it, right? That's the typical pattern. But I have to tell you, for me, productivity also means being intellectually stimulated. I want to be excited about what I'm doing. I want to be challenged by what I'm doing. And that feeds my love of lifelong learning. So productivity for me isn't just about walking through the steps. Those are expectations in academic society, but I think that it needs to be more than that. So I feel like I'm most productive if I'm really loving what I'm doing and I'm personally fulfilled by what I'm doing. So I would encourage people to really do a little soul searching about that, but also recognize that if you're going to be in an academic setting, there will be expectations for those traditional metrics of productivity, but it should be a little bit more than that, I think, to keep you going.
I deeply appreciate the idea of curiosity, right? Intellectual
Yeah.
curiosity. I think that's one of the things that I notice in people that I've had the pleasure of working with, collaborating with, research wise, or even just witnessing their research. I think they have a natural propensity to be intellectually curious, and research is the tool they use to explore the world. With that in mind, you've been so gracious with all these hot tips, these pro tips on how to do this, besides getting the corner poster at the front door. Whatever tips would you say? What other things have you seen or do you apply that help you be productive as a researcher?
So number one, I think that it's a tough road to go alone, and working together and networking is really important. And the older I get, and the longer I've been doing this, the more important and valuable I see that in the course of my career. And now the beauty is I look back and I see, like I was just talking to a colleague about this. For over a decade, I ran the National Center for Dental Hygiene Research and Practice with a colleague, and we used to host these conferences for early career dental hygiene researchers to come together in a safe space to be trained and to present their work. And now it brings me such joy of knowing I met them at such an early stage, and I open up a journal and I see their paper, and it's this great thing, right? So it's this gift of networking that I think is really critical to help not only yourself be productive, but to help other people be productive. I think too, I was socialized very early on by some of my mentors that it's really important to give back in some way, right? And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale, but even if you just extend a hand to somebody else, it's why if people call me and say, "Hey, can you help flesh out this idea?" I actually had a colleague contact me this week and say, "Hey, will you look over this script we're doing for a structured interview? Tell us what you think." I think it's really important to engage in this way. And yeah, we're all busy, and it's tempting to say, "Oh, it's like one more thing and I don't have time for that." But you have to remember that somebody did that for you along the way. So I think that's really important too. And but it also helps you stay engaged and think about another problem somebody's studying and isn't that interesting kind of thing. So that's, I think, really important. And I think the other thing that's helped me to be productive is to it's hard to describe this, but to try to become an agent of change in your discipline. And that can take on a lot of different appearances. It might be serving on a committee for a professional association. It could be helping to design curriculum around research or grant opportunities or being a reviewer or whatever that might look like. But and then taking it maybe to a bigger scale, like starting an organization or helping to run an organization or changing the path of an organization. I've been involved in some of those things. I helped to conceptualize the first research agenda for my professional discipline. It was so scary and so exciting. And now we're on the 8th iteration of it. Isn't that wonderful, right? So these are the kinds of things that I think also define productivity, some of maybe the intangibles, but that you get to be a piece of changing the course of your discipline.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, being an agent of change and bringing that to your discipline and to the education. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about the importance of educational research to you.
Yeah, so I have to say I'm sort of a late in life educational researcher. Obviously I was much more involved in clinical trials, and I'm also what I affectionately call a bench rat. I'm trained to do laboratory science as a physiologist, so I've sort of worn a lot of different hats. So educational research was a later career choice, and it's been a growth opportunity for me and something that's also really exciting because it's also taken me into the arena of qualitative research. And I'm the first person I am not a qualitative researcher. I've had to really learn and have tremendous respect for qualitative research because doing it is really hard to do. So I've had, I think, some neat opportunities as I go into this area, but we're really interested, some of us here at ASDOH, in working in simulation. And simulation isn't a new concept in educational research. It's so widely accepted in medicine and nursing, for example. And, I sort of fell into this accidentally because when we closed down because of the pandemic, I was involved in teaching laboratory training of how to teach students how to give injections. And then we were like, well, now what are we going to do? I mean, I can't send needles home with people who've never handled them and do that over Zoom. It's not feasible. So I actually called a friend of mine at another university who teaches local anesthesia. And I said, well, what are you doing? And she was telling me about this company she was working with developing simulators. And so I got in touch with them and we actually beta tested the local anesthesia simulator software last year. And now we're actually launching, we're in the throes of data collection because we've incorporated the simulator in the course. So we'll do our second round of data collection in a few weeks to see the effect of using the simulator, not just in the didactic training and the laboratory training, but now also as our students have moved through the hands-on clinical training. So I'm excited about it. And we've just incorporated a second simulator in our radiology curriculum. And so we're going to be gathering some perceptions from students about how using the simulator has impacted their confidence in doing procedures and how well it supported their learning. So technology is a big part of educational research, and I think it's really essential with today's learners. Especially, they're much more tech savvy than somebody like me, because I'm an old timer. They've grown up with tech, so the learning curve as a researcher and also as a teacher is more steep, I think, than it is from the learner's side, the adult learner side. So it's an exciting path to be on, right? So that's kind of what's happening. Now we're thinking about going into virtual reality simulation and looking at an opportunity to do some testing with that kind of technology. It's like sort of the next level tech with simulation, right?
That's phenomenal. If I may take a minute and just adjust this the conversation just a little bit. You have this paper. Let me read the title here for our listeners. Doctoral dental hygiene education would prepare scholars and leaders to improve public population health through changes in oral health policy and delivery. You discussed educational models that are critical for addressing the oral health needs across the country. For our listeners, could you take a moment? I think this is a really important topic, not just for dental health science, but health science in general. But I'm wondering if you might take a moment to maybe summarize and maybe expound upon the opportunities you see for designing instruction that prepares our students, to meet the real world challenges.
Yeah, practice is so different today compared to certainly when I entered the field. And one of the things about my own discipline in dental hygiene is that we are the last of the allied health professions who has not moved to doctoral level as entry into clinical practice. And it's a bit of a divide in our discipline. And, so I think this was actually very controversial within my area, within my discipline. And so we had to think about, well, what educational models, if we move to the doctoral level, need to be offered? Because what we see, for example, in nursing is you have, like the PhD, which is the sort of traditional research track in a doctoral program. And then you have the clinical doctorate, which you have nurses who are nurse administrators who work like in the operations of healthcare. So they maybe work in a hospital system, and they look at delivery of care and the effectiveness of care. So the intention is a little bit different. And so we did this paper, my colleagues and I, to try to think about, well, what does that look like? And then you have to also ask the question, which is, how will having a doctoral degree change the course of what you do? And then who gets trained, and how will it change the people that those clinicians treat at not just the local level, but at the population level? And then how does that affect policy? So for policy in dentistry, it ties back to things like supervision, access to care, regulatory issues for licensure. And so you could create these different educational models. Then you have to think about the translational piece of it, right? So we're still in the process of doing some of these things, but we have written several papers about this, because we have to think about not just training people, but then what are they going to do? Where are they going to work, right? You can't have a degree that is in paper only. It needs to prepare you to do something. And then you have to educate the other members of the healthcare team of how that person fits into the role. So just as we see people in health, all of the health sciences work in a whole host of settings. We now know, knowing how to talk to one another, having shared core values is really important. Knowing that you have shared taxonomy, that you can communicate correctly and our health record systems interface and communicate well together, that's a whole nother level of that. The way we think about approaching care and what our goals are for care, not just in the local level, but also for population health, have to align. So I guess for me, the hard think part of going down this particular project isn't just designing the training. It's what are these people going to actually do with that training, and how will our society benefit? A lot of our listeners probably don't understand that poor oral health is a major global health burden in terms of cost, the number of people affected, and how it affects overall health. And sometimes because we're so siloed away from everyone else, that gets lost in translation. So part of education has to be, how do we integrate better with the healthcare academic system as well as in practice? That's a pretty lengthy answer to the question you asked,
But
Quincy.
I think it's very comprehensive. I think it's very comprehensive, and it's near and dear to our heart here in the TLC, because we also believe you're thinking about the impact and like kind of the end game, the end goal, and we kind of look at it at the micro level, like what's happening in the classroom. Like the thinking about these instructional models does some of the work for you to help you better long term get to those the end game goals. So
Yes.
I think we are both working on this at the same time from the different end of the spectrum here. So I was so grateful to hear your answer to that. It was very validating. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah.
Y'all are doing some wonderful things. We're so fortunate to have a teaching and learning center at our institution, because I think sometimes we take for granted that people are comfortable with what they're doing with teaching, or they grew up sort of mentored in a certain way of teaching, and maybe just haven't had the opportunity or exposure to look at teaching and learning from different viewpoints. And it's a great example of lifelong learning. Is can we do something differently or better, or just try something new to see what happens, to reignite everybody's interest in what they're doing. So I think we're really fortunate. I'm so grateful to have all of you here.
Well, we appreciate that plug. We do, right in the middle. We appreciate that tremendously. But we believe it too. We try to model instructional ideas, things that we hope that faculty, full-time, part-time, can model themselves. And then we are constantly iterating and testing out our own skills. And matter of fact, as soon as we are done recording today, we're going to do an internal team lunch and learn, where we're going to do some training that model some new ways of doing things that we might each integrate into how we do some of the other offerings we offer. So thank you for that feedback. Really appreciate it.
I think at the center of what everyone is doing is they're answering hard questions. Is there a way that we can do this different or better? And I'm curious, in your experience, where do you find inspiration for educational research questions or projects? Do you have a go-to, or do you just you're very observant, you see it and you act on it?
Honestly, for educational research and all research, it's just what you see in everyday life, right? I think it's always important to think about it, maybe not as research, because I think sometimes people get intimidated when they think about research, but it's like, hey, is this working for us? Hey, we tried something new in the curriculum. Well, how do we know it's effective? And that's just part of like quality assurance. Like, I always think of educational research at the end of the day as quality assurance too, because you want to know, not just do you have the not best content necessarily, but the right content. Is it the right amount? Is it at the right level? Did people really like thrive in learning that? And how on earth would you even measure that? But to kind of think about that, and that it isn't just, what are the student evaluations at the end of a course? Is that we have to step back and say, hey, programmatically, are we on the right path? And I think the other part of, for me, educational research that is essential is to say and give yourself a break and say, hey, we tried this. We were really well intentioned. We thought it was going to work. And if it's not working for some reason, like, don't continue to struggle and drown in something. It's okay to try something else or to change path. I think that we have this I don't know, and I don't know where people get socialized to this along the way in academia, but it's almost like we're afraid to fail, or we don't want to admit if something didn't work well. And we like to, and this is of course why our research literature is very biased, right? Because everybody publishes about, well, look at all these great things we've done. And it's pretty rare that you find the paper to go, you know what, this was an epic fail. We tried this, we thought it was going to be great. It didn't work out so well. And what are the things you learn the most from? So I think like educational research gives us an opportunity to really self-assess and to also show us where there's opportunities to maybe try a new direction or a new path. And I guess it all really ties back to quality assurance too, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day.
I totally agree. I love that, unpacking everything you just said there. How do you find inspiration? What's ailing you? This is something that Brittany, Julie, and I talk about all the time. People show up and they're like, what should I do for education? I was like, what's bothering you right now about your students? Like, start there. Answer your own issues, discover, explore, right? Love that idea. But, being not being afraid to fail. What do you think of this idea? This is in my head. As educators, in some form or fashion, we have this sense that we need to look a certain way to be taken serious, maybe.
Yeah.
And so maybe if we try something and our fear of failure would maybe unravel how we feel, our self reflection of how our students will perceive us. What do you think of that idea? Maybe it's like, we cannot extend ourselves because of fear of failure, because of maybe how our students won't take us serious. It undermines our credibility. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think it's an essential part of self-assessment anyway. And we actually have some faculty here who are really interested in learning how they can grow from the way students have perceived their interactions with them. And I love the intention of it, because this is ultimately, again, how can we do things differently or better for everybody's greater good? And it starts with a small group of faculty, and I think that it's the responsibility of people who are, leaders of groups or in supervisory positions, to create a safe space and to be able to say, this isn't working for me. This is giving me so much stress. But also the safe space to say, I really want to try this cool idea. It might sound off the wall, but just hear me out, right? Because academia is also supposed to be a safe space to be creative, and to really promote intellectual curiosity, as you said so nicely, Quincy. So I think part of that is the culture of the institution, and it's an essential part of research culture. I've been at many institutions. AT still is the 5th institution that I've been a faculty member with, and the others were very heavy research intensive institutions. And your culture is very different. I think here, because we are growing our research culture, and it's certainly expanding, as you know, our educational research here. I think this is an important environmental consideration to think about as a university. How are we creating a safe space for people to do this work from whatever angle they want to approach it, and know that they are supported and encouraged to do that? It's maybe a philosophical question that I'm putting out there, but I think it's an important question, right? Especially if you're a newcomer to research and you want to tip your toe in the water, you want to feel like you're not going to fall in and drown, right?
Right. And that's actually like mind blowing. There's so many mind blowing conversations we've already, statements you've made, but we all agree, and it's easy for me to say higher ed should be a place of higher learning, making mistakes, safe place for students learning. You just opened my mind to a new idea. It should also be a safe place, a place of higher learning for the teachers, for the
Yes,
educators as well. Never thought of it that way. What if we're looking at it from both angles? We're honing our crafts as educators, as well as allowing room for students to learn and explore new ideas. That's phenomenal. Thank you.
I think that's some of what at the TLC we're really hoping that we can provide a little bit of that space. I have a saying, it's not a particularly elegant one, but I kind of sometimes when I'm trying to brainstorm, I say, let's throw some, spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, right? Having this place, this almost like a phrase to indicate this is my brainstorming. I just want to see get some ideas out there and have kind of practice being in that safe space and do that with incredible collaborators. So
absolutely. Love it.
Something I find a lot of value in. And you just mentioned newcomers, right? People who might be newer at research and for them finding a safe space to practice this and to be engaged in research. What advice or tips might you have for one of those newcomers, someone who's new and interested in starting in research, particularly educational research, but doesn't know where to start?
Yeah. The best thing is to just talk to somebody. The beauty is we have all of you in the TLC. So right away, we have a designated location with great people who work there and really nice programs, by the way, to help guide people in their first steps in developing a research project. That's an incredible program, by the way. And I think it's so important to be able to talk about a safe space. I have this idea. Let me work with people who are experienced to guide me. And I also think having someone positioned within the school who has oversight in research, who can also be that person. You can come to that person, and even if like it might be somebody like me in the dental school, but maybe it isn't me personally, I might be able to connect you with somebody else. And then also the beauty of having a professional network, is that if I don't have somebody at my ready disposal here who has expertise in an area, I might know somebody in another school who does have expertise, and maybe they're looking for somebody to be on their team. And that's a win-win for the investigator, for the team, and for both institutions, right? Because it's better together, right, to work in these groups. So I think you just have to let somebody know you have an interest, and then there's typically sort of a natural course of progression of connection.
So I think what you just said there is the secret, the book, the famous book, The Secret Approach to Getting Started with Educational Research. Think about it, send it out to the ether. The world will respond in kind.
Yep.
I love that. In all seriousness, probably, talk to the folks around you, work your network. And one thing I appreciate about ATSU is I really do feel like our rock star researchers like yourself are very approachable. That jumped off the page to me, even day one of getting here at ATSU. I felt like you could walk up to anybody and bounce an idea off them and ask for help. Besides coming to the TLC, we'll definitely try to network and help you and support you directly, as well as try to point out folks that we know that are supporting people around the campus. That's awesome. So let's, with that understood, like fast forward, we have a faculty member, somebody interested here at ATSU that now has an idea. They've kind of got some traction on an idea, but now are feeling like they need to seek out collaborators for the purposes of the project itself, because they like to be collaborative, these type of reasons. I love asking this question. How do you find a good collaborator, Anne?
That's actually not an easy question. When I think about myself, if I have a project and I personally am looking for a collaborator, I'd say one of the really important variables that I look at is, do we have a shared philosophy? A shared philosophy of practice. If your mindset is similar, it makes it easier to be productive. One of my frequent collaborators, we always joke we're like an old married couple because we can quite literally finish each other's sentences. So, by the way, that's a very rare find. Takes a lot of effort to do that. I also think you have to have a shared work ethic, and because if you don't, you have an imbalance of effort in your team. And there's usually somebody who's more of a leader in the team than the other person is, somebody who will take the lead in the direction. But ideally, collaborators, you can flip that role and you feel comfortable with this. I say, hey, Julie, you take the lead this time. And I'm totally good with that. Right. So I think having this, ultimately it comes down to trust, right? That you have to be able to be honest with each other, and to have very clear expectations and to hold each other accountable. I think these are important things. And that means you have to try on collaborators for size. Like, I might reach out to you and say, hey, Brittany, I have this idea for a project, but this is what I'm thinking, and this is how much work it's going to take. And I really need somebody who has X, Y, and Z skills. And you might say, you know what? That's just not me, or the time isn't right for me right now. I could maybe do this later. Quincy knows this firsthand from me because we have ideas and I go, I can't talk about it now, but I want to come back to this. So I think these are just some pieces of advice along the way that I've learned, but you won't know if somebody's willing to collaborate or interested in collaborating unless you ask, right? So you have to, and I would also say, set aside time to have that conversation. Don't do it on the fly, because you're distracted and there's a million other things competing for your decision-making ability. So don't do that. And maybe don't even do it formally, like go grab a coffee somewhere, or, I find maybe go off campus or go off Zoom, have a different kind of more relaxed conversation where you're free to be creative also in that conversation.
It's such great advice. I love what you said about reaching out and giving kind of the expectations of a project. Just because your would-be collaborator isn't available now doesn't mean they won't be in the future. That's such an amazing point. What I honed in on was collaboration is a relationship, very much like mentorship is a relationship. So for you, do you have tips on finding a mentor? We've already gotten so many great tips, but do you have tips on finding research mentors, or maybe tips serving as a mentor?
So some of these things are the same. The best mentoring relationships is if it's a bi-directional relationship. I've learned that because I've had mentors who were dictators, who were very autocratic, my way or the highway kind of thing. I've had all of them along the way, and I've found that the best mentors, best mentoring relationship is you both get something out of it. And so I think it also comes down to, and this is one of the challenges I think we face as faculty, is like in an ideal world, you would only work on projects that you personally were interested in because you were both going to, really get something out of that. We don't always have the freedom to do that. And I always try to be really honest with students who say, hey, I'm really interested in this kind of a project. Maybe it might be dental materials. Well, I'm the last person on the planet who should advise anyone on dental materials. So then my job as a mentor is to find somebody who could really provide that type of expertise to the project. And I'm a little bit different. I've actually had colleagues and students from other institutions sort of comment on my mentoring style, because I am not autocratic, because I think you grow if you have the opportunity to learn the bumps along the way, but also to learn how your hard work pays off. And I think you do a disservice if you tightly control the process because there's a lot of experiential learning that happens as part of the process. So I think, again, there has to be trust. You have to have really good communication. You have to have regular communication, and you have to set your expectations and your boundaries, by the way. So It's sometimes hard for faculty when you have lots of students that you have to mentor with very diverse topics. So again, this is where the teamwork and bringing other people in to the project, I think, is really essential for success.
Absolutely. And so, you've talked about how critical finding those mentors, the collaborators, the time, setting aside time, right, are to research projects. I want to, I guess, ask a little bit about tapping into some of the research infrastructure at the institution that you're at. So, what infrastructure at ATSU has been beneficial in supporting your scholarly work, and one that might be able to support others who are getting started?
What a great question. So I can tell you, because I've come from many, many other institutions, we have an incredible infrastructure here at our institution. And I think some of it goes under the radar a little bit. And I have personally benefited so much, and this is in no particular order because I'm sharing the love across the board here. First of all, we have incredible librarians at this university, and I have always felt from the very beginning of my career that librarians are essential personnel in research. Without good librarians, it's going to be a fail. You can maybe just trust me on that, but they are critical to helping you develop your project and figure out how to disseminate your project. Science communication, librarians, I'm a huge fan. We have tremendous resources to support researchers through the library's site, and I want everybody to use them and to know about them. So for me, I have always included librarians on our ASDOH research committee. It was one of the first things I actually instilled in the committee when I came on board here in my position, because they have to be aware of the things that we're doing and play a role in that. So love the librarians. Obviously love our sponsor programs divisions office. It's incredible to have people who are grant writers on staff, to people who can review your manuscripts for you and help you to be successful in publication. Those things in and of themselves are incredible services that we have. Plus, everybody in SP is fantastic in terms of grants management and contracts management. I work with them so closely. I feel very, very fortunate. Love our IRB. People going through institutional review board applications at other institutions, sometimes you wait 3 months before you hear back from them, or just even trying to navigate on their system of uploading your study is like a project in and of itself. And here on our Mesa IRB, my gosh, they have templates they've created. They're so approachable. You talk about approachability before, Quincy, like they're fantastic. Can't live without them. Work with them very closely. Wonderful thing. I think another really terrific program we have is our internal grants program. We invest a lot of money in our faculty and encourage their pilot work and support that. That's tremendous. And the diversity of the grants and the size of the grant awards is really wonderful. And we just recently increased the grant award for student grants. This is terrific. And this is how we support engagement. So I really want people to participate in the internal grants program. And then, of course, I already gave my love to the TLC because of training opportunities, but also, you all will attest to the fact I just call you up and I say, hey, I have this crazy idea, or I'm wondering about this, and what do you think? That's tremendous to have somebody right at your fingertips to be able to help out. And then I think last but not least in any way is the Research Nexus training program that we have through the Stoll Research Institute, because it's free. You can, brown bag your lunch, or, listen at home on Zoom, whatever it might be, or you can listen later on demand and hear the researchers at the university give some advice about, hey, you're thinking about doing a survey or a clinical trial or a study about such and such. And you get to know them and really take a lot of valuable information away from the presenters in the Nexus program. I'm a big believer. So I think we're really fortunate. We have lots of great infrastructure here.
I couldn't have said it better. It's astounding, having been at a few other higher ed institutions as well, how much support, from speed to the magnitude of financial opportunities, and just responsiveness of all of these things. I couldn't have said it better. It is off the charts. My secret goal, with somewhere inside my mind here, is to flood the Research Nexus group with folks from the TLC Educational Research course
Love
to
it.
go out, do their research, and then flood Deb and Brian with requests to present for those brown bag lunch and learn presentations. Somewhere in my mind, I'd love for that to happen. That's my goal.
I think it's great because it's also a safe space, right?
Right.
To do it within the institution with people who are invested in your success, right? I think it's a great idea.
Right. It's a community, right? Like-minded folks. Two, it gives them the platform. To me, it's celebrating. I want to celebrate. You put the work in this educational research course. It is a lot of work. Research is a lot of work, right? There's just no way around it. Yeah. And I just want them to feel the accolades and the accomplishment of even just getting a proposal together, and to get that attention and have people like yourself ask questions and cheer them on. I want that for them so bad. And I think Research Nexus is an awesome opportunity because it is a safe place. And because of the cross network, all our campuses, the people that show up for that, just makes it approachable. That's my word for the day. So thank you for that. I'm gonna get you out of here on this last question. Did we leave anything unsaid? My question is, this has been gold mine. I'm so glad we did this. I'm so glad you took time to share with us your ideas and your perspectives. I can't wait for our listeners to hear this. But is there anything, any final thoughts, any final comments, any recommendations you'd like to share with your listeners related to research at ATSU?
You'll never know until you try. I think don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to try. Research should be fun. Right? I think it's this big intimidating word. I wish we had like a different word for it, but it should actually be really motivational and should really push your buttons and charge you up. That's what I love about research. And I wish it were contagious, but you won't catch it until you try. And you know what? The big excuse is I don't have time. Like, well, if you had a magic wish there, Quincy. So my magic wish is that I had about 15 more hours every day. Right? That's the life of an academic. We all work all the time, and there's so much competing for our attention. And I'm still trying to figure out, right, how to navigate that, even after all these years. But it does take a little extra time, but it think about the trade-off of being really energized and excited about something. You might find it's time well spent, right? If it intellectually stimulates you, there's a big reward in that. So I guess that's my last bit that's unsaid.
Well, as strong as you started, you finished even stronger. What an awesome takeaway. Don't be afraid. You won't catch it unless you try it.
Right.
That's going on the bulletin board. That's going on the bulletin board.
All right.
I appreciate that, Anne. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're super excited to be able to share this with the ATSU community. Thank you so much.
Well, that was an amazing conversation we just had. Julie, out of all of the tips that Dr. Spolarich gave us, which one was your favorite?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I've got a sticky note here with about 8 different tips written down. So they're all competing, I think, for top billing for me. I think that the one that really stuck out to me most, I think, is a reminder or call, I guess, to measuring productivity in different ways, right? Not just how many citations, how many viewers, how many students in a classroom. Those are all important, but also how intellectually stimulating was a project and how much personal fulfillment did you get out of it? So balancing some of these standard metrics with the more or more tangible, these harder things to measure, but things that are really important.
Yes, exactly. Quincy, what really landed for you from that conversation?
I would say that I love the idea that she is looking towards instructional models to be able to address the big picture. To me, I felt like it was implied, maybe even explicitly stated, that it isn't for superficial reasons. Hey, we need to flip the classroom. We need to try some of these popular teaching models to drum up interest and drive up enrollment. We need to do this because we think it might help us better align our instruction, our training to the future demands. I think that was pretty clear. It came across to me. I really dug that part of it. And even before and after, kind of sandwiching this too, the focus being on the student. One thing she said before this is involving students in the research and how lifelong learning came to the top. This is an interesting concept to me because lifelong learning, although it's very intuitive and I'd love to believe in it, it's hard to measure. It's hard to drive and to connect to. But I'll tell you what, looking at it from my perspective, it was my master's, my first class in my master's program. It was an experimental psychologist that was like, hey, why don't you write a research question? Have you ever thought about this? And I was blown away that they had confidence in me to do that. But two, didn't know what it was, but I'll be right back. I'm gonna go figure it out. And since then I haven't stopped. And so this idea of exposing students and bringing them along, not just for the residential, she mentioned it's a great way getting them involved in research to make a competitive difference when they go to the residency things, but it could also help spark the next generation of researchers, whether you're a bench rat or an educational researcher. These are the folks that are going to set the tone for the next wave of how we do things in dental education, health science education in general, and higher ed in general. So love that she's bringing everybody along with us and thinking about students, patients, and the educators. She hit it from all angles. Love that.
That's really great point. I think for me, my one thing that I just can't stop thinking about is don't be afraid to fail. And how can we really push ourselves and know what works in our specific context unless we take a chance in the space, whatever space we're in, and we see what works and what doesn't work. And don't be afraid to share out if something has not gone according to plan, because when does it go according to plan?
Well said, Brittany. When does it go according to plan? Absolutely. I just got feedback from a viewer too, just early this morning. Absolutely.
Me too. So right there with you.
Oh my gosh. She really embodies the full range from giving back. She does some really cool things behind the scenes outside of her academic roles, and then bringing students along. She mentors as assistant dean of research. She's constantly mentoring the next generation of current faculty in ASDOH and others. And then she's active across the campus. She's involved with all the various committees, research and otherwise. So yeah, when I grow up, I'd love to be just like Dr. Ann Spolarich. Who would we like to thank? Where do we start? Special thanks, of course, to Miss Brenda Jackson, our heartbeat of the TLC. Without her help, we wouldn't be able to put this together. She's so instrumental behind the scenes. CNM department, like to make a shout out to them. Amanda Martinez and Mrs. Roxanne Layfield, always supporting us, giving us great ideas to make our these podcasts and the TLC offerings even better than we can. Hey, what did y'all think about the shout out to the library? They don't get enough recognition. They don't get enough love. You are appreciated. The next time our listeners get a chance, please thank a librarian. They do an awesome job. I couldn't agree more with Ann's point that they to do great research, we absolutely need our librarians. Special thanks to our guest, Dr. Ann Spolarich, who took time out of her day. As you heard, she's got a lot going on. Really appreciate her taking the time to share her perspectives on all things related to research, specifically educational research. How about you, the listener? want to really, really thank you for taking time out of your busy days, out of your busy schedules to take a moment to hear some great messaging, some great perspectives, some great conversation about educational research, the day in a life. This doesn't happen without you, the listener. Love to hear your comments. Look down below, leave a comment here for us. Click the link in the description that will give you credit to the Level Up certificate program. If you're not enrolled, it will walk you through the enrollment program, but you can get credit towards level 3, the research level, for listening to this 1-hour podcast and all the other ones. Take a moment to fill that out. Let us know who you are, what you thought of today's episode. We want to hear how we can bring more content like this to you. We hope next month that you'll tune in to hear our guest speaker. You ready for this? We get to listen to speak with Dr. Allison Snyder-Valier, representing ASHES, SOMA, and research support. Can't wait for that. Hope you're excited about that too. This is your friendly TLC team saying bye for now. Thank you for listening.